For as long as video games have been around, there have been enemies to beat. And an enemy has to feel worthwhile to fight, otherwise it just feels like wasting time. Developers have tried many different ways to do this. Some of them are big, some of them are crazy, and some of them are creepy. Really creepy. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, the 20 creepiest enemies in recent video games. Starting off with number 20 is the mutants from Sons of the Forest. Let's start this one off strong with some particularly grotesque freaks. You'd think being stranded on a desert island filled with hostile cannibals would be bad enough, but step in any cave and you'll find that the horrors on the surface are only the beginning. Now, your standard mutant's faceless, blind, has this translucent skin, which gives them an almost alien appearance. They're pretty gross, but nothing compared to the other creatures you're going to meet in the dark. The first true terror you're going to encounter is the finger mutant, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a human body split down the middle by rows and rows of monstrous fingers. They're also blind, but they still have an uncanny ability to find you in the dark, and are almost impossible to avoid taking damage when you're in melee combat with them. Less common variants of mutant include the twins who love to crawl on walls and ambush you from behind, the laughably bizarre caterpillar mutant that moves around like a slinky dog from Toy Story. I mean, they're all disgusting, but they're all dangerous, and they're everywhere in the confusing maze-like caves that are, dark as hell. Go figure. And number 19 is the teacher from Little Nightmares 2. For a lot of you out there, just being reminded of school is enough. But this teacher isn't just a reminder of the miserable past or present in school. It's also terrifying for entirely different reasons. Found in, no surprise here, the school chapter of Little Nightmares 2. The teacher looks like what you'd expect, other than weird bulbous head and rictus skin. When you're first caught by her and try to get away, that's when the real creepy stuff goes down. While you're escaping through the vents, her head somehow keeps following, eventually revealing she's got a bizarre extending neck that allows her to keep an eye out for troublemakers. It's part absurd, part grotesque, but it's also just the place where Little Nightmares really excels. Like, remember the guy with the long arms in the first game? The teacher's basically that, but worse. And number 18 is the Chainsaw Man from the Resident Evil 4 remake. Duh. These things were always tense in the original Resident Evil 4, but the remake really found a way to make them worse. That first appearance, when you get a close-up of their faces, and they're just like a lump of flesh. Nasty-ass red flesh with a burlap bag on their head. It freaked me out a bit, gotta admit. Those unblinking eyes are pretty nasty. Like, what the hell's going on there? They're even worse when they fight you. Like, they're still capable of killing Leon in a single hit, but now they're significantly faster and more aggressive. Only thing that's gonna save you is if you actually block their chainsaw attack with a knife. That's great that you can do that. If you couldn't, I don't think fighting them would make any sense. For people like me, though, who basically knew what to expect with the chainsaw guys, getting this psycho sprinting at me up the stairs, still shocking. Like, pretty much every encounter with these guys was just as tense as the first. And number 17 is the Man Centipede from the Demon's Souls remake. I hate these stupid things. They're not actually that dangerous, but man, they are nasty. Like, bugs are kind of creepy, blood is kind of creepy, piles of human faces all mixed together in infinite torment. Kind of creepy, yeah. And this thing is all those things combined into one exceptionally unpleasant package. The remake doesn't do anything new with them, but the added detail in the environment, their design, makes it, unpleasant. Like, the Tower of Latra is creepy already. It's a bunch of bizarre floating towers and walkways in the middle of a black void, but eventually you find an elevator that takes you to the base of the tower, which for some reason is a hellish blood marsh filled with these disgusting creatures called man centipedes. Like I said, they're not the most dangerous, but the area is so oppressive and dark that it's easy to get blindsided by these freaks. Did I mention they're freakish? Speaking of nasty blood marshes, honorable mention to another grotesque Demon's Souls monster, the appropriately named Plague Baby. It's a disgusting blood baby that gives you the plague by touching it. They really know what they're doing with the names, right? And number 16 is the astronaut from Returnal. Not exactly an enemy in the traditional sense. You never actually fight it, at least not in this form, but it appears in the creepiest parts of Returnal as a strange apparition, apparently haunting the memories of the main character. In the first really surreal part of the game, there's a house that'll sometimes randomly appear in the middle of the alien world, and when you go inside, you're suddenly in first-person view, exploring the house and seeing strange visions. The more you return to the house, the more this astronaut shows up, and while it never attacks you, there's something very sinister about it. Even though it's literally just an Apollo program space suit, eventually you do fight it in a way at the end of the game, but what exactly that's meant to represent is supposedly up to the player. Whatever your interpretation, it's creepy. At number 15 is the Blind Ones from Metro Exodus. The concept of these things sounds ridiculous, but actually trying to deal with one of them is one of the tensest moments in the whole game. Found in the 4th chapter as homage to the librarians from the first Metro game, the Blind Ones are, and don't laugh at this, eyeless gorillas. Now that sounds silly, but these things are dangerous, intelligent, and all around freaky, especially when they somehow start talking. No other mutants in the entire Metro saga can literally talk, but somehow these can, and they don't just speak nonsense, they taunt you and try to trick you into revealing yourself. They appear when you've got limited oxygen, but they force you to move quietly and carefully, which is nerve-wracking all on its own. They can be killed, but it takes so much effort and ammo, it's better to just avoid them, especially because they can kill you in only a few hits. All of that makes sense in the endgame section of Metro Exodus, one of the most heart-pounding experiences in the entire series. Yeah. And number 14 is the Headless from Sekiro. These guys are the worst. They're headless ghosts that appear mostly hidden away in dark, out-of-the-way places. They're not the most horrifying things in appearance, but getting close reveals why they're so creepy to try to fight. First, they emit a fog, so that makes them hard to see, but you can't dodge while you're in it, and the Headless can teleport freely while you're in that fog. That's bad enough, but on top of that, just being near this thing builds up terror. If that fills up, you just take massive damage. Oh yeah, and normal weapons barely hurt it. So if you want to kill the Headless, you have to risk using rare and expensive items that add magic damage to your equipment, along with items that protect against terror. Like, these things are a nightmare to fight, while also being one of the creepiest and most dangerous enemies in the game. At number 13 is the Endoskeletons from Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. For all its jump scares, Security Breach isn't actually all that scary, at least most of the time. One part that really got me, though, was the section of the game where you had to go through the maintenance wing, which is filled with these creepy endoskeletons, these spare bodies for animatronics that somehow come to life and, of course, want to kill you. Maybe just want to kill anything. Not necessarily that it's you, maybe these robots just have an insatiable bloodlust. I didn't make them, I don't know. But what makes them so nervy to deal with is that they pretty much work on original Weeping Angel rules. If you're looking at them, then they don't move, but if you look away, they can quickly try to sneak up on you. So of course you're stuck in an area that forces you to walk past these things to get through it, including multiple parts where they're both in front of you and behind you. So thanks a lot, game. I've always wanted to live through Blink. And number 12 is Ploosh from Atomic Heart. Not really a scary game, but in terms of design, pretty much all these bizarre plant monsters in Atomic Heart are pretty damn creepy. The standard zombie is bad enough with its split face, but the creepiest enemy in the game is definitely the Ploosh. This blood red vine monster thing. It's erratic, unpredictable, and very aggressive, while also being highly resistant to ballistic damage. So you're basically forced to fight hand-to-hand at first, and the first encounter is more of a tense boss fight, but they really start getting scary when they appear out in the open with other enemies. They're rough enough by themselves, but with a whole gang of enemies bagging them up, that's really when they're scary. And number 11 is the Revenant from Elden Ring. Nobody likes these things. The Revenant is kind of like the grafted Scion, but way worse. Like, it's a flailing human centipede of arms that's so bizarre, it's kind of hard to tell what it's even doing half the time. And to make matters worse, it loves to show up in these dark and cramped areas unexpectedly, giving it an easy opportunity to overwhelm you. It's all around fast, and it screams like crazy, like even more so than the other From enemies, so that's saying something. Can easily stun lock you to death, and it can teleport around just to be extra unpredictable. Long story short, these things suck ass to fight. They also look creepy, and they're rarely worth the effort of dealing with. Most of the time, just best to avoid them. So you never really develop that, oh, I've fought it a million times, comfort that you do with some of the other grossoids in this game. Unless you know how to kill them with healing. But I didn't know that. I do now, but I didn't then. And number 10 is the Chimera from Signalis. Most of the horror in Signalis comes to the oppressive atmosphere rather than enemies, but one enemy stands out as particularly unpleasant. The Chimera, a nasty amalgam of limbs sticking out of a fleshy torso. You fight it in this bizarre meat pit, and not like a barbecue, more like a hole. I don't know how to describe this. The music is really oppressive and disorienting, though. The whole thing is just creepy as hell. It's basically just one big reference to the abstract daddy boss from Silent Hill 2. But as the old saying goes, if you're gonna steal, steal from the best. And number 9 is the Finger Creeper from Elden Ring. For a lot of people, these creatures are first encountered in the Caria estate, where multiple of them are just waiting to ambush you in the courtyard. They're exactly what they sound like, by the way. They've got fingers. They're real creeps. Told you that From Software knows how to name their enemies. Still wondering why they didn't apply that skill to the dragon butts, but whatever. These weird, wart-covered hands with way too many fingers are for some reason just hiding all over the place. They're on the walls, hidden underground in ambush. They're real bastards. When you actually fight them, they're not super easy either. For being big hand things, they're not so much grotesque as they are bizarre. And a lot of the fear factor comes from their strange attacks and, you know, many constantly moving fingers. And number 8 is the mysterious figure from Inscription. The main antagonist from Inscription's first chapter isn't exactly an enemy, as all you can do is play cards against them, but they're the primary enemy that can eventually be defeated, so I'm just gonna say it counts. Even though Inscription is more of a card game roguelike than a horror game, there is a lot of creepiness about the mysterious figure. The weird laugh, the way they're shrouded in darkness, and especially the revelations you slowly learn about where your cards come from, make them especially creepy. I don't want to say too much because explaining this guy's deal kind of gives away a lot of what makes him so spooky in the first place, but just on appearances alone and overall demeanor, the mysterious figure deserves a spot on this list. And number 7 is the Hunter from the Dead Space remake. The original game was scary enough, but with a few key ways, the remake managed to top it. Sound design being a big one, the screams of the necromorphs are even more unpleasant. And while every enemy in the game is creepy in its own way, the worst, at least to me, is easily the Hunter. It's this game's version of the unkillable Stalker, a necromorph that you can't kill. All you can do is slow it down. When you chop off its limbs, it just regenerates them back, so the best you can do is slow it down and run away. This thing is unrelenting, and trying to deal with it while solving a puzzle or fighting other enemies, it's exhausting. The added backstory given to it in the remake only makes the encounter creepier somehow as well. And number 6 is Jack Baker from Resident Evil 7. Now, we talked about Marguerite Baker and her horrifying boss fight in the past. Let's talk about the patriarch of the Baker clan, Jack. This guy doesn't actually appear all that much in Resident Evil 7, but the few moments you do deal with him are pretty iconic. He's scariest right at the start when he's an unstoppable hunter chasing you through the house. He looks like a serial killer with those wire-rimmed glasses and dead-eyed stare, and his psychotic glee in torturing is kind of freaky as hell, but also a little funny. It's one of those enemies where you're pretty sure he's dead, but you're on the edge every single time you're going through the Baker house. It's scary in all the right ways.
And number 5 is the Night Folk from Red Dead Redemption 2. For me, what makes the Night Folk so creepy isn't just their appearance and behavior, it's how mysterious they are. You can go through your entire 50-hour plus campaign and never realize that there are these incredibly dangerous and creepy enemies stalking the bayou, just waiting to ambush Arthur at night. They're so infrequent that it gives these guys an air of mystery that only makes them creepier. Sure, there's silent psychos who attack you with a knife on sight, but the fact that it's pretty much optional is what really makes it worse. Like, if they always appeared in the story, then you'd know they were coming. But here, you never really know. You could just be wandering around the swamp at night by mistake out of nowhere, and you get attacked by these crazy swamp people who instantly kill you with a knife. It's all the more shocking because of how rare it is, and it's stuff like this that makes Red Dead Redemption 2 one of the best open world games of all time.
And number 4 is the Rat King from Last of Us Part 2. By the halfway point of The Last of Us Part 2, clickers are kind of old hat. Most people know how to efficiently deal with them, by this point at least, which takes away a lot of the fear factor. In fact, by this point in the game, most people probably assume they've seen everything there is to see with the infected. So when you get to ground zero of the San Francisco outbreak, and suddenly get ambushed by a gigantic amalgamation of infected bodies, it's kind of a shock. The fight's one of the most intense in the entire game. This giant monster smashing through walls trying to kill in this dark, confusing basement area. It's disorienting and overwhelming, just like the best horror game bosses. And to make matters worse, it has one trick up its sleeve where the body splits off from the rest. So now you have to deal with a sneaky stalker, which is fighting you at the same time as a gigantic brute. All intense, all scary as hell. One of the best moments in the entire game. And number 3 is Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake. And what else is there to say about Mr. X? AKA T-00, the tyrant bioweapon Umbrella sent after you in the Resident Evil 2 remake. He's one of the best stalkers of all time. He's huge, faster than he looks, sound design's top-notch, so you're always freaking out when you hear his big boots stomping around in the distance, and he is unrelenting. He's always hunting you, and it's not like in most games where stalkers appear and disappear at will. When he's around, running away is a temporary solution, but he's always there. Until you get to certain scripted moments that take him out, he's simply unkillable, so you've got to get around the police station dealing with zombies and puzzles, all while under constant threat from this guy. It's some of the most tense stuff in the entire Resident Evil franchise, and one of the greatest additions to the remake, period. Like in the original, Mr. X was scripted. He appeared at scripted moments. It was pretty great too, but the remake just made him much scarier. At number 2 is The Inhabitants from Outer Wilds, Echoes of the Eye. The Outer Wilds had a few bits of horror in it, like those creepy anglerfish enemies, but for anyone who's played the DLC for the game, called Echoes of the Eye, then you know what the real scariest thing in the game is. What makes the inhabitants so incredibly creepy is how unexpected they are. You can spend a long time exploring this mysterious station, which for the most part is completely safe, before you see these things. The space they appear in, an alternate version of the station in the virtual world, is oppressively dark. All the creepier because just finding this place is a secret. And when you start seeing moving figures in the dark, that's when players are pretty much ready to nope out. In terms of their appearance, they aren't really scary looking. They're just the long extinct aliens of this station holding candles, but the atmosphere and setting make these some of the scariest enemies ever. And finally at number 1, the baby from Resident Evil Village. Man, screw this baby. About halfway through Resident Evil Village, it suddenly turns into an amnesia game, and it is terrifying. What makes this thing so freaky is how totally unexpected it is. The horror in Resident Evil is almost always physical. It's a thing that's at least partially real, so you're usually dealing with things that are blatantly bizarre and abstract. Like, they tend to look real to some extent. But then you're wandering through this creepy basement, and suddenly this gigantic red baby fills the entire hallway and starts barreling at you out of the darkness. It's just like, what the hell's going on? I've played through Resident Evil Village multiple times. This part still puts me on edge. Even though I know this stupid giant freak is going to do this thing, still freaks me out a little. Like, that's how effective it is. It's so freaky. It's easy to hate it. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.